guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Hair Babes in Business podcast, or welcome back to the Hair Babes in Business YouTube. I am so excited to have you guys here today, and I am so excited for this episode because I think this episode is absolutely game-changing. If you are new here, or if you're even old here and you have never listened to a podcast of mine or watched a video of mine, and you've decided that you're going to make an exception for just one, make it this one, because I promise you this is going to help you so much. This is something that I feel like almost every hairdresser struggles with, and I just think that this information is going to be so unbelievably helpful. And Laura, the wonderful guest that I've interviewed today for this podcast, has just given so much free advice for you guys, and it is honestly such a game-changing episode, and I feel so grateful that she's just shared so much of her knowledge and wisdom with you guys completely for free. I think that's just absolutely amazing. Before we do dive into this episode, I do just want to give a little disclaimer that I am really fussy about who I bring onto my space and into my space. And I just wanted to really clarify that it's a really tricky time at the moment, and I feel like there's lots of get-rich-quick schemes kind of happening at the moment. And sometimes I think people do prey on hairdressing a little bit as a career, promising that you're going to be an overnight success and a multi-million-dollar salon if you follow these 5 simple steps and whatever it may be. And I just don't think that that's 100% practical for every single person. But what I really love about Laura is she's super genuine, super authentic. Her knowledge is undeniable and her results speak for themselves. And I think that what she's promising is really realistic, really wholesome business advice. And that's why I'm so excited to share this week's episode with you, because I just know that you're going to get so much help from it, so much wisdom from her. She's just such a beautiful person, and her and I really align in the fact that what our mission is to help hairdressers and help women in business to be able to achieve all their dreams and realize that you are so capable of doing all the things that you want to do. So before we dive into today's episode, I want to let you know about who Laura is. Laura is a profit and growth consultant, helping spa, salon, and clinic owners get more profit and financial reward from their businesses. She created the Profitable Salon System and is also the host of her own podcast, Prosper and Profit. She's also a mum of 2, a coffee fiend, and she lives on the Gold Coast. I absolutely loved having this chat with Laura. I think she's just such a beautiful human. I love her passion to help hairdressers be really successful and have really thriving, profitable businesses. And I just know that you guys are going to get a wealth of knowledge from today's episode. So I'm going to dive into the interview, but I will let you guys know that I'm going to link all of Laura's information in the show notes and in the YouTube notes so that you can go and follow her and see what she's all about as well. Let's get into it. All right. Are you ready to dive in?
I'm ready to go.
To start off with, do you want to kind of let the listeners know who you are and what you do?
Of course, I would love to. And thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to dive into this conversation. So as you would have said, my name's Laura O'Hagan. I call myself a profit and growth consultant, and I've created the Profitable Salon System. I'm a podcast host. I have a podcast as well called Prosper and Profit. And what I do is all about helping salon owners get more financial reward, more profit from their salon, because usually that was one of the reasons why they started this thing in the first place. They didn't mean to create a 60-hour-a-week job that paid themselves less than when they were working for someone else, but they accidentally do. And I take the approach of increasing profitability through a finance and numbers and using that information to make really good decisions and set up the business so that we're driving profit through everything that we're doing. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what I do. Was that okay? Was that clear?
Yeah, that was fantastic. And I think that's really great. I just wanted to mention to the listeners that you actually come from a financial background rather than a hairdressing background. And how this kind of came about is you were kind of having a conversation with your hairdresser and really realized that there was a gap here that needed to be sort of filled.
Yes, exactly. So as I was chatting to you offline, so I've been doing this work for quite some time. I'm an accountant by background, but I was never into like the tax and compliance stuff. That stuff gives me the ick as well. What I love and why I went into accounting in the first place was I could see that accounting was the information that decision makers used in business. And I was like, well, I want to be with the decision makers. Like, that's where I want to be. I want to be leading strategy and all of that kind of stuff. So that's why I went into accounting. Over the years, I kind of worked in the corporate for a while, did the accounting thing there, did management consulting for one of the big firms there. And I eventually branched out and did business coaching on my own, and did various different things. But as you said, I started seeing with my clients that we could work on the business strategy and all of that was great, but I could see there was this like missing piece around actually like, what do we do with this money that's in here and how do we make sure, yes, our accountant's going to give us the amount of tax as an example that we need to pay at the end of the year, but even me as an accountant myself in my own business, I never had the tax ready. And I'm like, what is going on? There's something missing here. We can be creating these really wildly successful businesses, but we feel stressed because we're like, I don't have the money to pay for that thing. And where is it all going? Like, I actually experienced that myself. And I really want to share that because people think, oh, an accountant, like, that's what you guys naturally do. Accountants are actually really great at interpreting the numbers and things like that. And what I came to realize was this cash flow piece, right? And managing the money was a missing piece in what I was doing with my clients. I was missing it in my own business, and I stumbled across the book Profit First. Some of your listeners may have heard of it, some won't, and that's totally fine. It doesn't matter. We'll talk about what that is. But I implemented that in my own business from the book, and it changed things for me, right? The next quarter, I had my BAS ready for like my GST ready to pay my quarterly BAS. And I was like, okay. And then at the end of that year, I was like to the accountant, I was like, I'm ready for you to do my tax return. We don't have to wait till March. Let's do it in August, right? Because I had the money available, right? Like that was one of my pinch points was taxes. And I know for a lot of salon owners, clinic owners, it is as well. And so I discovered Profit First, implemented it in my own business. And I just started telling some of my clients, like, hey, I've implemented this really great system. Have you heard of it? Like, let's kind of put some of the principles in place. And it was so helpful for them that I became certified in the method. And so that was kind of one of the first little pivots. And then, as you said, I was working with online business owners. So I'd kind of been working with online business owners through COVID, through that time. There was just so much happening. And as you said, I was in there getting my hair done, as you do, with my hairdresser. And I was like, oh, this is kind of where I've kind of gone now. This is what I'm doing. And I don't know, like I wasn't kind of trying to like tell her like you should do this or anything. It didn't even cross my mind. I was just like, oh, you might talk to people who might mention this, and hairdressers. They're always talking to people. We were just chatting, and she said, actually, I think that's something I might need. And I was like, okay, like, do you want to like do this together? And she was like, yeah. So we kicked that off, and that's when I discovered all the things that I think are so underestimated in this industry, the level of complexity that it takes to manage a salon with commercial, you've got a commercial shop front, you've got stock, you've got retail, you've got services, right? Like you've got services and retail, like there's complexity there. You've got staff, right? You've got pricing. And the thing too is you've got a lot of money moving through the business, but also a lot of requirements of that in terms of product orders and paying staff and meeting superannuation, contributions and taxes, GST, all of this kind of stuff. And I saw straight away, I was like, okay, I had never really thought about how complex these businesses are and how much need there is. So I was working with my hairdresser, loving it. I was like, this is so great. And I could just see straight away, there's such a need for this. There's so much complexity here. These are amazing people that have set out to do something amazing in the world. They love what they do. And they're kind of, suddenly like in this area that they didn't necessarily know that they were signing up for. They didn't realize like, hey, you're going to have to manage tens of thousands of dollars a month. And you're going to have to manage paying your employees on time and making sure the back bar is stocked all of the time. Because if your product's not there, if, things aren't there, you can't deliver your services. You've got to keep the lights on, And so it just kicked off a spark in me. I never really saw it coming, but I just loved it so much. And I was like, let me take this out to more and more hairdressers. I work with dermal clinicians and registered nurses who do like, injectables and all that kind of stuff. So hair, beauty, and there's just so much need and there's so much passion. And it's just a gap. Like I think it's one of those things where it's just a gap in knowledge, right?
Yeah.
It can be closed. And the way that your business is right now does not have to be a reflection of what it is going to be like for the next 5 years or 10 years, or just like, so many people are like, oh, hopefully I can just sell it and, get out. Your business can be in such a different position once you kind of just close this knowledge gap. And so I think you can tell I'm pretty passionate about this. It gets me so excited.
Honestly, it gives me like excited butterflies to hear you talk about this because I know, like, from this side of things, I feel like there's so many brilliant, talented people out there
Yeah,
who have like the most incredible businesses, they have the most incredible business minds, and they're almost doing themselves a disservice because they're
yeah,
just lacking on this one little thing that, like you said, if we can just close the gap on, it's really going to make such a big difference for people. So, yeah, this gets
exactly.
me very excited because I feel like just like me, but I also know that so many people listening are like, oh my God, tell me more. Like, help
Yeah.
me fix this problem.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think, like everything, like this is what I always say to my clients. If you sat someone down in front of me and gave me all of the color and a pair of scissors and were like, create an incredible result here with this person, I'm sure if I was given the skills and spent the time and, you trained me, I could probably get to that point, right?
100%.
But if someone asked me to sit down and do that today, I mean, I could cut my son's hair and it'd be okay, but like I would not, I could not produce the result I have in my own hair. And it's not because I am dumb or I'm just never going to be successful or anything like that. It's just like I just haven't learned how to do that,
Yeah.
right? And that's how I like to think about the money management in a salon too. It's you've spent, a decade, maybe more, getting really skilled in what you do, like creating great relationships with your clients, getting to manage staff and learning how to do that. You've learned so much. This is exactly the same. And it doesn't have to be some like 5 year, 10 year journey. Like you could probably, definitely, this is what I always see all of the time is you probably surprise yourself at how much you can get across this and how it's not as complex as you think. I think there's a lot of fear instilled around numbers and money, and perhaps someone in high school, a teacher told you that you weren't very good at this or whatever, and we've carried that with us. But managing money and cash flow and the finances in the business is not the same as algebra. It's not the same as parabolas or whatever else other crazy math stuff we had to learn in high school. It's not that at all, right? And so I think you'll surprise yourself. I'm always so delighted when clients are like, "Oh my God, this like I can do this," right? And it like we said, it's just a knowledge gap. It's just a skill gap that can be closed just like every other single thing that you've learned in your life up until now.
I love that so much because I feel like something that I'm very passionate about, and I can hear that you're very passionate about it too, is breaking this stigma that hairdressers are dumb or
Yes.
hairdressers are stupid. And I hate even saying that, but that stigma is there. And I know a lot of us feel that. And a lot of us kind of look at these things and we're like, oh, we just can't even do that. But that's just out of our knowledge range. Like we can't even begin to imagine that we could even start to tackle that ourselves. So
Yeah.
I love, like, I feel like this is so empowering for so many people to be like, no, actually, you can. Like, you have to learn some skills, but once you've got the skills, you've got this.
Exactly, exactly. And, it's so true. I love the mindset and the behavioral side of things as well. So maybe school wasn't the best environment for you. Maybe you heard some of those things at school and they've kind of stayed with you for life. Maybe you've picked it up somewhere else. Maybe like someone said something to you once about the profession that you've chosen to go into. But I 100% see that not to be true. And like I said, you are already managing such a complex business. Your business is so much more complex as a hairdresser, in a salon, whether you run a home salon, whether you're a freelancer, whether you've got a commercial space, you are already managing quite a complex business that people from the outside don't understand. And, that was kind of my realization. Like, it wasn't that I thought hairdressers were dumb or anything like that. I just never really thought about what actually goes into running a hairdressing business. And then when I saw it, I was like, wow, okay, you are managing a lot. The world's underestimating you and what you're doing. And, that's kind of what sparked my passion because I know that people can feel really undervalued in this industry. And what I want you to know is you don't have to be undervalued from a monetary perspective, right? You can thrive. You can probably break out and create an incredible wage for yourself, create profits, create more income personally than you probably ever thought was possible. But we just have to understand there's just that skill gap we need to close, and then we can kind of get there.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, because I feel like what you just said is going to be so validating for so many people. So that is some amazing insight that you've just shared there.
Yeah.
So for the hairdresser who's listening, who's like, tell me more, I need you.
Yeah.
Where do we begin?
Okay, where do we begin? That's a great point. Okay, let's begin with one of the things that yeah, you see, my brain's going wild. I'm like, there's so many places we can begin. And that's part of the thing too. It's like there are so many things out there. There's so much noise. Okay. So it can be hard sometimes to actually wade through and be like, where do we begin? What I'll talk you through is where I begin with my clients, because I think that's helpful. So I've created a system. I call it a system, the profitable salon system. I created this after I worked with salon owners, clinic owners, spa owners, just seeing that we were tackling the same things over and over again. And so I've kind of built a system around it. And so where we focus first, which is probably the opposite of what a lot of people think, is we focus on getting financial clarity first, right? And people are like, oh, but like financial clarity, relating to getting more profit and that, like, surely I need to grow first. Surely I need to sell more. Like, surely I need to expand my team and all of this. It's like, actually, we need to get a really good understanding of what is currently happening. So when a new client comes to me, that's the first thing we do is we get clarity on what's happening. How is the money moving through your business? And then we use Profit First. So I touched on Profit First. Profit First has these amazing benchmarks in there. So a benchmark is kind of like, here's roughly the standard of a business that your size should look in terms of how money is moving through the business. So one of the first things that I do with my clients is we look at how does your business currently look? And what does it look like against the benchmarks, right? Because that straight away gives us clarity in terms of we're spending too much, or we're not setting aside enough for tax, or, whatever it is. And then we install a cash flow process, right? And this is part of financial clarity, because we as humans, right, as people making decisions in our business, we're probably told, like, go and look at your profit and loss, see how you were traveling last month, see like what your profitability is, and then kind of you can then from there like figure out if you can go ahead with something or not, right? I'm sure people have been like, yeah, I think my accountant told me that's probably what I should do. But the truth is, most of us pick up our phone, log into our banking app, and be like, okay, I feel like I can do this. Or, okay, there's a bit of a problem. I can't necessarily do that today. And that's how we're truly making decisions. Okay. So with Profit First, and we can dive into this. I can go so much more detailed or keep it high level. You like let me know where you want to go. But with Profit First, one of the first things we do is we do that assessment of this is where we are, this is where we could be, and we install the cash flow process. And the cash flow process that we use uses bank accounts, right? And we put a weekly process in place where you move money into designated bank accounts into the purposes that it needs to cover, so that every time you open up your bank account and look, you've got a good idea in terms of how much is available for product, right? And knowing that we've already set aside tax, we've already set aside our employee, payroll, enough to cover the payroll. We've set aside all of those things, because what generally happens is most salon owners that I speak to are usually running their entire business, anywhere from, a small home salon, with maybe $100,000 a year turnover, through to salons that are doing seven figures. They're usually running their business off one or two bank accounts, right? So we've got anywhere from sort of $10,000 a month to $80,000 a month just coming into one account, and it sits there and we're like, what am I supposed to do with this? I think I can afford to do the product order, but I'm not really sure. And is my BAS due this quarter? And how much is that going to be? And it's all just sitting there. One of the things we talk about in Profit First is kind of moving things onto smaller plates, right? Because it's kind of like the buffet, right? If we've got the buffet in front of us, we all know we go and kind of like go a little bit crazy, right? And that's what can happen with having our money all in this one big pool. It's like, okay, well, $60,000 came in this month. It's all there. I guess I can do this. I guess I can do that. And then, 3 weeks later, like, crap, there's not enough for payroll, or the BAS is due and I don't have the $12,000 I need for that, or whatever it is. There's all these different pinch points for different business owners. But what we do is we install a cash flow process there so that when the money comes in, we send it at least as a starting point into these 4 other bank accounts so that we know this is for tax, this is for the owner to pay themselves. I haven't even touched on that, but that's a big pain point for people in
Yeah.
terms of I paid everything and that's all covered, but I'm the one missing out every week or every month. So we set money aside into these categories so that every time you open your bank account and look, you're like, okay, I've got a really good idea of how much is left for running the business. And we're not accidentally spending our GST. We're not accidentally spending the next product order. We're not accidentally spending our profit. We're making sure they're all set aside right at the start. And that provides so much financial clarity. So that's the first place to get started is what's happening in my business? How does that compare to benchmarks? You can use the Profit First benchmarks. They're widely available like on the internet. And can I install a cash flow process so I at least have some system around how I'm managing my money? You can start really, really simple and you can add in complexity over time, but that is truly the best place to start because you're setting yourself up for success and you're knowing like, hey, I've got everything covered. Using Profit First, have one guess what we make sure we set aside. We make sure we set aside profit first, not get to the end of the year and our accountant's like, hey, congratulations, you made $70,000 in profit this year. And you're like, awesome, where is that money? And they're like, oh, that like doesn't actually exist, right? We actually set it aside as cash. So I know I kind of just spoke about a lot there. So please come in and ask me questions. Does that make sense in terms of where's a good place to start?
Yeah, I think that's so helpful. And I think that's really good for two reasons. I think, first of all, a lot of salon owners, because they have not had this like background with money and really like looking into the way you budget and the way that you price things, a lot of people are just like, well, what does Sally down the road charge for a
Yeah.
haircut?
Okay.
Oh, she charges $50. Well, maybe I'll make mine 45. Not
Yeah.
pro like not actually factoring into that like why are we charging that amount, like what are we covering, what are our products, what is our rent, what's our utilities, and all those sorts of things. It's just like, oh well, ballpark, that's that price, so I'll charge this price. And so I think that would very much help with that. And second of all, because I think I know a lot of people that I've spoken to in the community, and I'm sure that you've probably had this come up with the people you work with too, are really bad at emotionally discounting. And I
Mm.
think to have this kind of setup, you'd be like a bit more thoughtful in the process of every time that you go to emotionally discount someone, well, where is this actually coming from? Is this coming from my tax money? Is this coming from my profit? Like, where are we actually missing out every time we do that? So I think that's really helpful.
You raised such a good point in terms of with that clarity, right? And with the process, what I see time and time again is kind of funny. I'm like, oh, yeah, I help my clients do all this stuff and make all of this money. But like, what actually the biggest thing is the mindset change, right? Which is exactly what you're saying there. I see it over and over again. This light bulb goes off and they see like, the cost of providing this service is actually this, right? And like, this is actually a true business. And especially getting that clarity up front, this is how money is being spent. This is the potential benchmarks of how it should be spent. This light bulb goes off in terms of this is why I'm not getting the financial reward. This is why I'm in here cleaning up because everyone else is left for the day and we can't afford to bring a cleaner in. And like, this isn't what I signed up for. There are all of these micro things that are happening all of the time, and getting this clarity is it's kind of one of the things I always say is like we can't change what we can't see, right? It's very hard when we're just like, oh, there's just a big problem out there, right? versus we're like, hey, here's exactly what the problem is because we've got the awareness, we've got the visibility over it. So getting that visibility and actually understanding this is how things happen, this is how money moves, this is how I want it to move, right? Starts to inform the decision making that you're making in the salon day to day. It starts to inform like, I felt bad charging, $600 for a balayage that took, 6 hours or whatever. But actually now I can see like maybe I'm just breaking even on that. Like everyone's numbers are different, so don't take that pricing at all as an indication
Yeah.
of what price. But it's that thing, like you said, it's like sometimes we've got the emotional thing. We're like, oh my God, like, and I was speaking to someone else, they said, as a hairdresser myself, I wouldn't necessarily pay that. Right. And I'm like, well, it's kind of funny because my partner's a builder, right? And like we had to build a garage on our house and we got a quote to build the garage. And he's like, I'm not paying that. I'll do it myself. And I'm like, awesome. But what's so funny is someone else who didn't have those skills would be like, oh, that sounds like a pretty good price to put the garage up. It's like with me, I can't do my own hair. When my hairdresser quotes me, I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. Like, I'm so happy to pay it. So, what we need to do is like have the data that kind of takes our mind drama, I like to call it, out of it, take that emotional, like, well, I wouldn't pay this, or I don't know if I'm overcharging, or I really want my clients to be happy. And, I love them so much. I want them to keep coming back, not necessarily realizing that when we do that, we're actually not punishing ourselves, but not necessarily getting what we truly want out of it just because we don't have that visibility over it.
Yeah. And I think it can actually run into some problems because it's like if you're constantly trying to give, sooner or later it might mean that your business isn't actually viable. And so
Exactly.
you're actually doing a disservice if you love these clients and you want to keep making them happy in undercharging because maybe it means that you're not going to get to do it forever.
Exactly. What this work comes back to is ensuring sustainability,
Yeah.
right? In terms of there's only so long you can go without paying yourself before you've got a major problem or like a major personal financial problem or a
Yeah.
major relationship problem, right?
Yeah.
They're usually the two things. Like,
Absolutely.
there's only so long that you can keep tipping in personal funds to top up the business. If it's not profitable, there's only so many times you can tap the bank, right? And so what we need to know is, or like you said, what we need to think about is this set up to be sustainable? Right. If my business isn't sustainable, and this can come back to working hours, so much of the problems that my clients have is the burnout from the working hours and things, because they're just constantly like, I'll just see this one extra client, right? I'll just stay open late tonight. I'll just do this extra appointment. I'll just open on Monday as well, even though I did Saturday. It's like just thinking that's the answer to get there because we've been ingrained that working harder is surely you know, a fair, what do they say? A fair wage for a fair day's work and all of that. But as a business owner, that's just not the case. And just this, just is starting to give you a little warning sign that if your business isn't profitable and you keep thinking, I'll just do this extra thing, surely this is the thing. Maybe it's an extra staff member, just, there's an opportunity to just go back a few steps and actually figure out like what's happening,
Yeah.
right? Because a business has the potential to be profitable, maybe not with one staff member in a big commercial premises, right? There's going to be a point, but I've got clients ranging across all the models, right? From home salon to freelancers renting chairs in other salons to salon owners who have rental chairs to salon owners who have staff. And like I said, from quite small home sole operator kind of situations all the way through to seven-figure salons, right? And all of them can be profitable if they get their foundations right. So it's not about the size, because I think sometimes that can be the trap. Well, if I just double the size of the salon, surely then that'll be the thing, right? But if we're doubling an unprofitable business, what does that mean, right? It means we're losing more money,
Yeah.
right? So I loved what you said. I think we're so on the same page as if maybe it's hard for you to like shift your mindset in terms of like, well, I've got to be paid fairly and I need to get financial reward out of that. Sometimes people feel like that's greedy. They've got all these money stories that are coming up. Maybe for you, it's just an opportunity to shift it and be like, how do I make sure that my girls have a job next year?
Yeah.
how do I make sure that all my amazing clients can keep coming back and getting this? How can I make sure the doors are open in 5 years' time? Right. Those are such important questions that come back to the same. And, you know, you as you kind of go through that process, you'll have a bit of a shift and you'll see like I need to be financially rewarded from this too, because you took out a big risk in opening your doors, right? You made the leap. But in entrepreneurship, we make the leap and the risk is higher. And what's supposed to mean is the reward is higher, right? It's the risk reward, ratio. When we're employed in a job, we get paid a fixed wage because we're not necessarily taking on risk, right?
Yeah.
When we step out on our own, we're taking a risk. We need to be rewarded for that. So yeah, sustainability is crucial because, as you said, are you going to be here in 12 months, 2 years, 5 years time? If not, the only way to fix it is actually go through it, right? And not think it's just this thing around the corner. It's just this thing. It's just going to be that next thing.
I love that. I'm going to ask a really pervy question.
Okay, go for it.
I don't know how much of this you'll actually be able to disclose, but I feel like this would be something that would be really interesting to know. When you do actually get in and have these conversations with people and kind of look at the way things are structured and the way things are running, do you find it's more common that people need to do a price rise and they're not necessarily charging what they should? Or do you find it's more common that people are just not budgeting and saving and spending the way they should be?
Yes, it's a great question. I developed what I call the profit trio, like the salon profit trio. These are the three things that together, if you've got these three things in place, you cannot not be profitable, right? Now, what are they? Everyone's like, what are they?
Hey guys, listen up.
Okay. Expense management, right? Which is making sure we're being diligent with our expenses. This doesn't mean you can't have things. It doesn't mean you can't have a nice salon, that kind of thing. But to make sure that what we're spending on is creating return, right? Because to answer your question, it's a bit of a combination, and I can kind of talk through different examples. So I can even think of a client who said, like, I know there's a lot of waste in our spend, especially as the business grows, because it becomes harder and harder to be across all of the micro details. And what can happen too is we outsource some of the social media, the Facebook ads, the this, the that, and it all kind of gets a bit like unwieldy. And then maybe we thought we canceled the subscription to that thing because we're not running ads anymore. Or we thought, we moved from Fresher to Timely and we thought we closed that. But like, all of these things, because it's like, oh, $60 a month is small in kind of the big thing. But, I had one client, she had 3 different Spotify accounts.
Oh, wow.
Right. And like, it's a small number, right? But like, when we multiply that across, like, we found $60,000 of savings in her business by going through that process on the expenses, right? And she said, I know there's a lot of waste. And her business wasn't a 7-figure business, right? We sometimes think like, oh, it'd be easy to find that number if my business was super big. She was kind of in the $250,000 to $500,000 range turnover. Just all these things that were wastage. So I think that's a thing too, because sometimes we've just grown up in houses where our parents weren't careful with money or they had a different approach and things like that. Like, we've all got so much different stuff that we bring. And so sometimes, and like we said, like, we've never been taught. Like, some people just haven't been instilled, to tuck some stuff away for a rainy day, or we need to make sure that everything's covered. And that's where that system that I mentioned up front really helps with that, because we make sure and one of the things we do in Profit First is we kind of use the out of sight, out of mind principle. So we put some of the things that we can't touch into a separate bank to our day-to-day bank. So if your day-to-day banking was with ANZ, we'd open up 2 accounts with CommBank, and we're setting aside money there for taxes and things like that, and profit, right? So it's not there. So then we're constrained and we have to run our business off what's left over. Okay, so to answer your question, yes, the expense side of things, it can be a challenge. Some of my clients come to me and they're managing things really leanly. So it's really a mixture of, it just kind of depends how things are being managed in the day to day. Some people come knowing like, hey, I've always been told to be really careful and conscious, and I'm running really lean and I'm keeping things as tight as possible. And sometimes people like, I don't kind of know what's happening. It's all gotten unwieldy and I don't know what I should be doing. So that was the first one, was the expense management. And yet, to answer your question, that can be a big challenge. There's often even people that feel like they're running things fairly like leanly, there's still usually like thousands of dollars of opportunity there when we kind of think about it across a year. The second one in the the profit trio is pricing, right? You nailed it. And what I do with my clients, and I've actually got a free workshop on this that people can grab. It's like on my website. So I've got a pricing for profit, like 20-minute class. Kind
Amazing.
of
And guys, I will link all of these in the show notes so that you guys can get access to all of this as well.
Perfect. Because what I do is I work through a process where we actually figure out what is our cost per hour.
Yeah.
Okay. Because, like you said, if we're looking at Susie down the road and I don't know, Sophie, who's on the Gold Coast in Burleigh versus, someone who's up, in a completely different suburb and in a different area. And, we can't do that, right? We know, like, for example, real estate, right? The shop rent is going to be so different if you're in Manly in Sydney. That's where I grew up. Versus, somewhere else in Sydney, maybe in the Blue Mountains, right?
Yeah.
It's likely that your shop rent is going to be so different. So if you're a Manly being like, oh, well, all of these people are charging this, not recognizing your rent is 3 times as much, right? Then we just can't build our business off what other people are charging. I think, and I mentioned this in the class, it's important to get an idea of like what the market is, because it's just like selling a house or something. If I'm like, hey, my house is worth $7 million. I'm going to try and sell it for that. And the market's like, no, it's not, right? There is a point where we get outside of the market and we have to kind of, if that's the case, if you did this process and you're like, my costs are too high that I'm out of the market, then that means, it might be the expense side of things and different things to look at. But yeah, so we go through and do a cost per hour, and then we go through your service menu and you look at this service takes this long. My cost per hour is this, and I'm charging this, right? And we factor in GST, right? Which again, is really important. And then we can see straight away, like these services are profitable, these ones aren't, okay? And we can go through that process. So I would say about 80% of my clients do a price increase,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
When we
Wow.
do that process, because most of them have not done that kind of process before. It's usually like I opened the salon and I started my prices off what we were charging where I worked before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I
Absolutely.
opened my salon and I know there's another one a few streets over. So I kind of did what they were doing. And the problem is we don't know if they're profitable.
Yeah.
We don't know their expense base at all. That, we can't charge what Just Cuts charge because they have a different business model, right? Like, oh, some people might have that model, but someone who does one-on-one high-end services, we can't compete with Just Cuts. That's not a good pricing structure to copy, right? And so we need to understand all of those different things. Why? Like, are you a premium service? Are you more of a, focused on quick, right? Sometimes people just like want quick, in and out,
Yeah.
get it done and go on, right? All of these different things come into the pricing. And so if you're comparing with a salon who is maybe just focused on we get people in and out really quickly, and in your place you create a really personalized one-on-one experience and you keep the place really quiet. So, maybe you've got, really high-end kind of cookies and like coffees and margaritas and all of the things. Right. And none of this is right or wrong at all. But like these are the things, like the nuances that get missed when people are looking at what others are charging. And not to mention at all the fact that we don't know if we're copying a profitable service, and every business is unique. Even a shop the next suburb over, maybe you're in a premium beachfront location and they're at the back of an alley, behind a shopping center, right? And so of course the experience is different, the cost base is different. So we've got to be really, really careful. So that's the second one in the profit trio, is pricing and pricing for profit. And in my experience, there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah.
Right.
Just before you move on to step three, I
Yeah,
would just
go
really
for it.
love to like reiterate it again for the listeners that, like you said, 80% of people are probably not charging what they should be. And I know this is such a pain point for so many people listening, is that they feel like they're scared to put their prices up. But I think that's really refreshing to hear that a lot of the time that is a part of the problem. You need to put your prices up. You've got to charge your worth.
Exactly. And the problem is that when everyone's not doing that, it can become a race to the bottom,
Yeah.
right? But Something that I always get my clients to kind of think about is like, if we want to break out of that, then how are we unique, right? It comes back to some of those other things. This is why everything in business is so interconnected. Our branding, our unique experience, right? Like the client experience that they get when they come in, all of those things. So if you're like, hey, we want to go here and we know we need to go here, right? But so and so over here is doing this. Well, like we need to create a different experience, right? And so these are different things, but sometimes people don't. Like sometimes you don't need to do that. It's just like not a lot, but like I've had a lot of conversations with clients where they come to me and they're like, oh, we haven't done a price rise in at least 2 years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what have your input costs changed, right? Like those, products, they're not sitting on the shelf at the same price that they were 2 years ago. Your staff, right? The superannuation guarantee's gone up. They've probably had award, increases. Maybe you're paying them above award to get amazing staff in. Everything, electricity, right? Everything's been going up. And people, I get it. It can feel really hard. I have a client, she's not a hair salon, she's a beauty salon. We just went through this process and it was so much of just having to kind of go through that comfort zone and do it. And there was so much fear around losing clients, but it ties back to that conversation we were saying before around sustainability. Well, you're going to lose all your clients if you have to close in a year's time because we don't have money to keep the business running. But as well, too, like what this client found is I think a couple of people did leave, right? A couple of people did not rebook their next service or whatever, but she's having her biggest months ever.
Yeah.
Right. She's just kind of crushing it week after week because, it's going to that busy season. Things are getting busier and busier. She's got her new prices in. And I sort of said, like, we have to be okay. Like, one of the things with putting a price increase through is like, we have to be okay that some people might no longer want to come here. And this is the tricky thing with pricing, right? But like, if we're putting through a 10% or 15% price increase, we can lose a few clients and would still be ahead. But I think for a lot of people, what's really helpful is to understand in their mind why they landed on the price. So for this client, when someone said like, oh, this, some of her services like had to have a bit of a bigger jump, right? It wasn't like we did a flat thing across the board. We looked at the cost to deliver the service and we looked at what she was currently charging. And then we kind of came up with, well, this is what these need to be. And so a couple of things did have a bigger jump. And someone did kind of say like, how did you come up with these prices? And she could say like, I came up with my cost per hour. I figured out all the costs that go into it. And I saw how long the service takes. Not that you ever have to explain, but it just felt good to her in her heart that she could explain and not just like, oh, I just went 15% because of inflation. She could exactly, it's black and white facts. And that also made it easier, as you were kind of touching on before, it made it easier for her to actually realize she kind of had to do it because when we looked at it, this was one of her problems is when we did the analysis, when we did the financial clarity focus right at the top, I was like, your business is making a loss, right? And what we want to make sure is, she'd worked with someone else previously who'd given her a plan to like double the revenue in her business, right? Like, okay, cool. Like this is the answer is double your revenue, right? And what we need to make sure is that what I was saying to her is if you double your revenue with everything staying exactly the same, you're going to double your hours, right? But also you're going to double your loss. Like we're literally going to be putting like money out the door in a bigger quantity than it currently is. And so this might just be like a heart moment for some listeners is like, if I'm selling unprofitable services, no matter how much more I sell, I will not make a profit. That's why bringing another team member and just kind of selling more and filling their books up, it's like, okay, well, we're filling their books up at loss making. We're just actually making all of that bigger. So we're scaling up what's not working, right? Which means we're making the problem bigger. So I think that's so important. You get to decide, right? What's so great about the process is you get to decide. You look at it all, like this is my cost per hour. Therefore, multiplying this service takes 4 hours. That means it takes us, you might need to make a few tweaks for like extensions. That's where I find is like the one thing that's
Yeah.
different, because that's not necessarily picked up, right? We're not going to be like a cost per hour for, a cut is the same, right? We do a cost per hour and we would probably add in the extensions. If you do extensions, that's one of the unique things with hair. But suddenly we've got this in black and white. And we're like, this is taking this actually cost me this much to deliver. I can see my pricing is this. Maybe it's break even. Maybe it's a slight loss. Maybe it's making $1 per service or something. You don't have to do anything with that if you don't want to, but at least you know, right? Which is what we were talking about before. Having the visibility over it is key, because the problem right now is you probably don't know what the actual problem is. It's like, I don't know. I just keep showing up. I keep trying to work harder. I keep trying to do better. I keep trying to get my girls to sell more retail. I keep trying to do the right things. At least then we'd know, be like, okay, we know that when we sell these 4 services, we actually lose money. And maybe that's fine because we actually, I had a client who's got some like legacy, like gentleman cuts, and, I think she had like 3 men that come in every 6 weeks to get them done. And I was like, you get to decide if you're just like, hey, right. Because the other thing too is maybe you adjust the time standards. Sometimes, that's not always as easy to do in a hair salon, but sometimes it is. It's like, hey, we're booking people for 4 hours for this, but can we get it done in 3.5? Because that's the other variable that can be changed there. Like, there might be other things, we just changed the massage from 8 minutes to 4 minutes, all of the things. So at least you know then what you're working with. So you can understand, maybe you just decide like, hey, we actually don't like delivering those services and they're loss making. So maybe we can just cut them off the menu, right? Or actually maybe those services are loss making, but we know when someone is getting this service, they're also getting this, this, and this. So we're okay with that. Again, I'm definitely not telling you this is what you need to do, but what I'm trying to say is at least get a look at it and see the picture of it. Like bring the visibility around it. You don't have to do anything with it today. You don't have to do anything with it next week, but you can sit with it and kind of start weighing up, what am I going to do with this, right? Do I want to do something? Does something need to change? Right? A lot of the time, you just go through a mental process and get to that point where you're like, okay, I've decided these 5 things that we're going to change. Everything else is maybe fine. But bringing that visibility to it and being able to say to someone, oh, like we didn't just make up $550. We didn't just like lick our finger and, stick it up, or we didn't look at what Susie down the road was charging. We had a really detailed business process around that. And again, not that I think you ever have to explain to your clients, but sometimes you might want to, right? And for you as well, you've got that, like, I can't discount this because if I do, I know we're only making $5 on this service, right? Or whatever it is. Every time I discount that, I'm losing money.
Yeah. Right. I love that. Such a power move to know.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. That's what's so great about this whole financial process is there's a lot of, and I can completely understand why, there's a lot of kind of head sticking in sand kind of mentality going on. And it's not empowering, right? Because we're like, I know there's a problem. We're just trying to work harder. Maybe one day we'll make it, that kind of thing. But I'm not actually going to look. And I get it can be like overwhelming. And that's why I just noticed there was so much need in this industry. I mean, there's a need across multiple industries, but I just enjoyed this industry. So let's go into the third one then of the profit trio. So we looked at the expense side of things. We looked at the profit, the pricing and making sure you're priced for profit. And then the third one is your utilization level. Now, everyone calls this different things. Your staff productivity, your staff utilization, your staff booking rate, whatever it is, right? But if we have our staff booked at target, we're selling profitable services and we're managing our expenses, we can't not be profitable. Yeah. So that's the third thing. And that's when you kind of ask the question, what is it usually with people? It's usually either one of these or a combination, right? And like the overspending comes from not having the clarity from the cash flow process, right? Those types of things. Or the overspending comes because we're not factoring GST into our pricing. And then that final one is our booking. So sometimes what's happening is our staff are standing around idle, or where if you're an owner operator, you're not booked at the level you need to be, right? And again, it's one of those things where some people have come through, employers that are really on this stuff and like educating you as you go, like this is where we need you to be and that kind of thing. But others haven't. And recognizing like you want to be paid and your staff are going to be paid, like your staff are going to be paid no matter what. If they're in for an 8-hour day and they're only booked for 4 hours of that day, you're likely not making a profit there, right? So again, it's one of those things. We could be priced for profit, but if our staff, aren't being booked up at the level they need to be, then we're kind of paying them to stand around. And sometimes that's the nature of the beast. But again, that's a really important metric to be looking at, because it's one of the things I see why I put it in that profit trio is it's just not being monitored, right? It's just not being measured, and people don't know where to be aiming for, right? We're aiming for like 80 to 85% like booking percentage.
Yeah.
So if we're monitoring that and we're seeing like, I've got a client at the moment, it's like it's way below where we need to be, that's actually you as the salon owner's problem, right? That's a you job to solve. Now, you can get your staff to do things, we're encouraging them to do social media and that kind of thing. But actually, what I always say to my clients, if that's them, is like, put all your clients into staff and spend all of your time. Like you need to bring in new clients to the business. And we can ask our staff to help with that, but ultimately the responsibility of that sits with the owner. So that's that third one in that profit trio. So that's another one that can come up too, because maybe something happened and a bunch of clients, it just happens, they're moved and we haven't been focused on client attraction. And we've just noticed that over time, maybe the last 18 months, a whole bunch of people have moved out of the area, and we just need to focus on getting our staff bookings up again. So if we have all three, if our staff or ourselves, if we're a solo operator, are booked at the level that they need to be, if we're priced for profit and we're being conscious of our expenses, we have to have a profitable salon. There's no way we can't not, but I've made that and broken that down into a very simple kind of method. That doesn't mean there's not work, right? Every single one of those things has a whole bunch of things that sits underneath it, but it helps you identify where's the best like use of your time to focus, right? Might be all three. You might pick out there's two big ones or there's one key one I want to look at. But with those three things, if all three are kind of where they need to be, you can have a thriving, successful salon.
I love that. I think that's going to help so many people. And I think a lot of people are probably going to want to talk to you more and hear from you more. So like I said before, I'll link everything in the show notes.
Yep.
But we unfortunately are getting to a point where we're about to run out of time. But I do just want to ask you one more question before we do wrap this up. Something that a lot of my community are really talking about at the moment is the cost of living crisis, and the fact that they are feeling that sting at the moment. And obviously this is a really hard time because, like we spoke about before, we're coming into Christmas. There's going to be a big influx of money, but then sort of getting into January and February, sometimes it does get a bit quieter. And I know that this is something you've talked about, and I would really love for you to expand on this a little bit more. Do you have any tips or any advice for people who are feeling that this is probably going to be a probability or a possibility for them?
Yes, such a good point. So the best thing to do is be thinking about in November and December what needs to actually be set aside for January and February, right? That's, in my view, like that just creates that safety net for you. And so what we were talking about right at the top in terms of financial clarity, we actually do that at an annual process. So we take into account that seasonality. So if you were putting a process like that in place, you would build up buffers and cushions across the year to cover January and February. Now, I know if you're listening to this sometime in November, right, that might not be something that you can put in place for this January and February, but I would encourage you, like, that's what you should be using your time for in January and February, is thinking, I want to set this up so this isn't like this next year, because I've been working with my clients across the year to be like, how do we make sure Christmas closure is covered? We're paying staff, you're getting paid through that period as well, all of that. And we know January and February in some, not every single business, it just depends, but traditionally is that lull period. So if that's you and you go through that experience, what I would say is come back to this podcast in January and February and definitely think about, let me set this up now, use that downtime to set that up for success so that you don't have the same experience in a year from now. I know that's not super helpful if they're in it now. What I would say now is I would start just putting the cushion across every week. You're going to have potentially bumper weeks every week, kind of from mid-November through till whenever your doors close. And your business doesn't actually need that level of funds every single week. Right. So even potentially if you're too busy to install like the entire cash flow process that we spoke about, I would open up a separate bank account, just one, and I would call it buffer or something like that, Christmas buffer. And every week I would move money across there. Hey, we just had a bumper week. We've paid payroll. We've done this. We've done that. And there's all of this fund sitting here. The problem if we leave it there is it can just unintentionally just get eaten up. Let's have a really great Christmas party. We'll throw in this. We'll throw in that. Right. And actually it's like have the Christmas party, have fun, but recognize again that there's a purpose for some of that money. So that's what I would be encouraging people to do. Even depending on the size of your business is kind of going to depend. But even if you're putting $500 a week, maybe some of the big businesses you could be putting across $5,000 a week, but putting some things across each week while things are booming to cover January and February, even if there's not a whole bunch of science to it right now, like you can build the science in, and I would encourage you to do that once you've got the time to do that. But that's just the best place to start is put that cushion there, set that aside. Your business is having more cash coming in now than it needs to cover its expenses each week. So setting some aside now, don't leave it till the 20th of December, right? Start now, start in mid-November, start now and just put across a bit each week and just put it somewhere where it's a little bit harder to access. If you've got like an online savings account that's kind of separate to your main banking, or at least an account that doesn't have like a debit card or something like that, and just have it sitting there so that you've got some cushion for January and February. And then again, too, probably things just like what you speak to is starting to think about what strategies are we going to do now and what we need to think about now to be booking our clients in January and February. Do we want to be looking at introducing like an annual membership and getting people to sign up for that for Christmas? And, or can we offer some sort of, first quarter of the year treatment plan that's, going to do X, Y, and Z. So just thinking about that too, thinking about while people are in spending mode, right? Like this is the time of the year where everyone's like, okay, we've been good all year. It's finally time to let our hair down, right? And like, can we, use that to our advantage? It's obviously to the client's advantage too. It's not a one-way deal. It's a win-win. Yeah. But what are the things we can put in place to encourage more smoothness in our cash flow across January and February?
I love that. And I think that's a really different perspective to what I've sort of ever really thought about, is that even before you do that promotion to get those new clients in, actually when you've got that quiet time, working on your plan so that when those new clients do come, you've got a plan in place and you've got a strategy in place. That's really, really powerful.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard now for a lot of people to work on their business in November and December. And so kind of thinking about that and thinking about, well, when can I create those pockets that I can work on my business? I know for some people, they're saying November's still a bit patchy. So you might have half a day here or an afternoon there or whatever. Start thinking about those things because, people are most likely buying Christmas presents. They buy presents for themselves. They're like, let's lock in, the VIP membership for next year, or I'll get my family to chip in and like, contribute to that and those kinds of things. But all of these things need us to carve off time to think about them and then make decisions on them and actually implement them and execute them in our business so our team or us can actually do the doing.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your wisdom and your knowledge. I know this is going to help so many people. So I really, really appreciate you coming on today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I feel like we could talk for hours, but
I know. I was just thinking before, I was like, we maybe need to do another episode.
if there's questions that come through, we can do a part 2 at a later date.
Yeah, that'd be good. Maybe in that January, February period where everyone's kind of like, help.
Yep. Everyone's like, I need to go back to that then, 100%. But Jess, thank you so much for having me, for sharing this with your community. I'm really on a mission to get the word out that you can create the financial freedom that you want in your salon, and it's possible in the salon and the business that you have now. It's just, looking at some things that potentially you haven't looked at and kind of putting on those big girl pants and being like, I'm gonna tackle this head on. So thank you for letting me share this with your community. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much. And thank you for what you're doing, because I really do think this is going to be a game changer for so many people in the industry. So thank you for bringing that knowledge to us.
You're so welcome.
Well, guys, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope that you found this episode really, really helpful. I hope that you got so much information out of it. I know that Laura is just a little wealth of knowledge, and it was such a pleasure to have a conversation with her today and have her on the show. Like I said, I'm going to link all of her information in the show notes and in the YouTube notes, so you guys can go and follow her and listen to her podcast as well, because I just think that you're going to get so much knowledge from her. And if you want to work with her, then you can find her on socials and follow those links as well. Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episode. I hope that you absolutely loved it, and if you did, I would love it if you would give me a like, a follow, or subscribe wherever you're listening. And I look very forward to talking to you next Monday. And just a little reminder that as this Friday is Black Friday, I'm going to be doing a little sale on my Consultation Queen course on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So if you want to get your hands on that for a cheaper price at $39.99, now is the chance to do that. I've had so much positive feedback from everyone who bought the course already. So if you guys want to get your hands on it at this amazing sale price, make sure you jump in either Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. Well, I hope you guys have a fantastic week. I want to say thank you so much to Laura for joining us and giving us so much wonderful information. Like I said, she's just a beautiful human, and I'm so excited for you guys to learn from her and hear more from her. But in the meantime, I hope you have a fabulous week, and I look very forward to speaking to you guys next Monday. Mwah.